We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 33b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought the opinion of Shmuel that the mezuzah should be placed at the beginning of the upper third of the doorpost, and the Gemara asked which Tana is Shmuel following. The Gemara brought the Tana Rabbi Yossi, who says that it should be placed high up on the doorpost. Initially, the Gemara understood that that was not consistent with Shmuel, but then the Gemara said that it is consistent with Shmuel. Umay tchilas shlisha elyon de ka'amar, and what does it mean tchilas shlisha elyon? When Shmuel says the beginning of the upper third, that's just laharchika, means to say in terms of distance it shouldn't be more than that much away from the top of the doorpost. That essentially is the lowest it should be, but it can be higher, and therefore it is consistent with what Rabbi Yossi said. The next line the Shita Mekubetzes takes out, but really just elaborates, Shelo laharchika min hakora shel nala yoser mishlish. Again, it shouldn't be more than that third distanced from the top of the doorpost. It should be at the minimum height, should be the beginning of the upper third of the doorpost. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Mitzvah lahanicha betefach hasamach l'Rosh Hashanah. It's a mitzvah to place the mezuzah within the tefach that is closer to the Rosh Hashanah in the doorway. And the Gemara continues, my time, and what's the reason for that? Rabbanan Amri, the Rabbanan say, Kedei sheyifka b'mezuzah miyad. That way, when someone is entering the house, he immediately meets the mezuzah, so to speak. Rav Chanina Misura Omer, Rav Chanina from Surah says, Ki hechi disintegrate, so that it's a greater protection. If it's more towards the outside of the house, it protects more of the house. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Bo re'eh, shelo kemidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, midas basar v'dam. Come and see that it is not the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way of people. Midas basar v'dam, when it comes to regular people, Melech Yoshev mibifnim, the king sits inside, V'am mishamar noso mibachutz, and the nation, the people, they protect him from the outside. Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ein okay, the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not like that. Avodav Yoshvin mibifnim, it's his servants who sit inside, V'hu mishamar mibachutz, and he protects them from the outside. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Hashem shomrecha, Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha, that Hashem is your protector. That is a pasuk from Tehillim. And Rashi explains, disintegrate should protect them. That's why it's closer to the Rosh Hashanah. L'chol habayis min hamazik, and that way it protects the entire house from that which damages it, from the shadim, the demons, and other kinds of damage. Al yad yaminecha, and then it says in the pasuk, on your right, the mezuzah liyad hayamin. The idea is that the mezuzah is on the right, he bichnisa, so it's on the person's right when he enters, and therefore this pasuk is a reference to mezuzah. And the Gemara continues, Darish Rav Yosef Berei de Rava Mishmei de Rava. Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, darshan in the name of Rava. Hamik lo tefach psula. If he inserts it deep into the doorpost, a tefach, then it is puzzle, it is disqualified. The Gemara continues, Lema Messiah. Let us say that the following brisa supports this drasha of Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, in the name of Rava. It says in the brisa, Hinicha befatzin, if he inserts it deep into the wooden doorpost, O shatala aleh malbein, or let's say he adds a framework over the door frame. Im yesh sham tefach, if there's now a tefach of space, meaning again the mezuzah is now inserted by a tefach or more into the doorpost, tzarich mezuzah acheres, so then a new mezuzah is needed, and im lav, if not, eino tzarich mezuzah acheres, so then another mezuzah is not needed. And so this brisa seems to be saying exactly what was said in the name of Rava, that hem mikla tefach, if it's inserted deep a tefach, then it is possible. But the Gemara continues and says, Kitanya, this brisa might not be a support for what Rava said, because what is this brisa actually talking about? It's talking about Bepesach Sha'achore Hadelis. It's talking about a door, an entrance that is behind the door. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But the Gemara continues, Habehedyo Katanila. How can you say that the brisa is talking about a Pesach Sha'achore Hadelis, an entrance that's behind the door? But that's already taught in the brisa. In the next line it says, Pesach Sha'achore Hadelis. It says if you have a Pesach, a door that is an entrance that is behind the door. Im yesh sham tefach, if there's a tefach of space, tzarich mezuzah acheres, then a new mezuzah is needed. Vim lav, and if not, ain't no tzarich mezuzah acheres, then a new mezuzah is not needed. So that's a separate case in the brisa, and so therefore the first case in the brisa really does seem to be a support of Rava. And the Gemara continues and says, Keitzad katani. Actually, this brisa is just elaborating. It's saying how so, and so the second part of the brisa, which talks about Pesach sha'achore hadelas, is just elaborating on the first statement in the brisa, in which case this brisa would not be a support for Rava. And Rashi explains, hemik hachor tefach, again, the hole where he's inserting the mezuzah, it's a tefach deep into the doorpost. V'kava bo ha-mezuzah psula, and he affixes the mezuzah there, it's possible, it's disqualified. And Rashi continues, patzim dehainu saf, that's the doorpost, mezuzah shel tzuras ha-pesach, again, that's talking about a mezuzah that's put in the doorpost of the door frame. O shatala ala malbein, or let's say he puts the mezuzah there, but then he adds a frame around the initial frame of the door. And Rashi explains, shala'achar shekava ha-mezuzah, that after he affixes the mezuzah besaf on the doorpost, hosef malbein bepesach keneged ha-pesach, he adds like a frame around that entrance. Im yesh ba'omek hapatzim o ba'oso malbein shatala ala mezuzah tefach, so if again it's inserted a tefach in there, or if the frame that was added is a tefach, tahashtahi mezuzah tchuva ba'omek hakosel tefach, that again at the end of all of this the mezuzah is now deep within the wall by at least a tefach, so tzarech mezuzah acheres, then a new mezuzah is going to be needed. And then the Gemara continued and said that the Bryce is not necessarily a support for Rava because it might be talking about Pesach she'achore hadelis. And Rashi explains, Bepesach she'achore hadelis kagon sheyesh b'meksoa habayis patzim kavua u'shnei psachim mechutachin. The case would be, for example, let's say we're talking about a corner of the house. Essentially, you're going to have two doors, one at each side of that corner. Echad l'daron ve'echad l'mayra, if you have one in the south and one in the west. So we're talking about the southwestern corner of the house, and there's an entrance, there's a door in the south and one in the west. The kava mezuzah b'fnim b'chalal pesach hadromi, and so he has a mezuzah as one enters the one that is in the south. Now, if one is entering the one that's in the south, so then the mezuzah is going to be affixed on the right side as one enters. So that's not going to be by the corner doorpost, that's going to be by the other side. And the next words should read ucheshahadelas pasuach, when the door is opened, meaning to say when the door in this by the southern wall is opened and pushed forward, have a pasuach l'mayrav, so it's essentially going to swing right in front of the entrance that's at the west, achore hadelas, right behind that door. So im yesh ove bepatzim hamavdilan, so if the thickness of that doorpost at the corner, if that is a tefach bein pesach lepesach, that it has a tefach at each doorway, so tzarech mezuzah acheres, so then you can't just have one mezuzah for the entire entrance, you're going to need another mezuzah lepesach ma'aravi for the door that's at the west. Hoel ve'ein hamezuzah bechalolo, because the mezuzah is not considered to be part of that entrance, part of that airspace. V'im lav, and if not, if that corner doorpost is not a tefach wide, ein tzarech mezuzah acheres, so then another mezuzah is not needed. Sharei kemunach bo'oso pesach atzmo, because it's considered that mezuzah that's by the southern entrance is considered for the entire entrance, for the western entrance as well. And Rashi continues with an alternate explanation, Perush Acher, another explanation, Shederech Hashirim Lasos Pesach Eitzel Shar HaGadol, wealthy individuals would make an entrance by the large gate, another entrance, Shein Poschem Shar HaGadol Tamid, they didn't always want to open that larger gate. V'hachi Kamar, and according to that, it would be saying as follows, O Shatala La Malvin, if a frame is added, is suspended over there, V'yasa Eitzel HaMalvin Pesach Acher, and then near that frame, there's another entrance. Im yesh bein pesach lepesach tefach, if there is between both entrances a tefach, have shneim chashuv, and then they're both considered important. V'tzarech mezuzah acheres lekatan, and there would be another mezuzah required for the smaller entrance. The Gemara then said, ha behedra katani law. How can we say that's the explanation of the beginning of the brisa? That's already b'seifa dahi. That's already what it says at the end of that brisa. And the Gemara then continued and answered, keitzad katani. The brisa is just elaborating how so. V'hachi kamar, and it's saying, hinicha befatzim o shatala la malbin im yesham tefach, and what is the case? Keitzad, how so? Kagon pesach shachore hadelas, for example, a pesach, for example, an entrance that's behind the door. And the Gemara continues, Tanit was taught, hemid la malbein shalkanim, if he puts up a framework of reeds, and so therefore it's not possible to affix a mezuzah in the traditional manner, chotech shvoferes umanicha, he carves out a tube and he places the mezuzah inside the tube. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravacha brei de Rava, Ravacha the son of Rava says, Lo shanu el shehemid ulevasof chatach v'hinicha, this is only going to work if he first puts it up and cuts that tube and then places the mezuzah inside. Aval chatach v'hiniach, but if he first carves out that tube and he puts the mezuzah in there, ulevasof hemid, and then he puts it up, so then psula, then it is disqualified, because that's a disqualification of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. One has to make the mezuzah, it can't already be made. This was mentioned on the previous summit, and so therefore again it has to specifically be that he puts it up and he creates that tube and then he places the mezuzah inside of it. And Rashi explains, Malbin Shalkanim, a framework of reeds, Shalom Matzah Mezuzos Eitz, he doesn't have a frame of wood, Vyasa Tzuras Pesach Shalkanim, so instead he makes the door frame out of reeds, Chote Chaticha Me'echad HaKanim, so he takes one of the reeds and he cuts it, Shein Chalulim, he cuts it hollow, makes it a tube, V'yitin HaMezuzah Ba'oso Makam Chatach, and he places the mezuzah in that tube. And then the Gemara said, Avol Chatach B'Shvoferes, if he first cuts that tube, V'hiniach Mezuzah B'Soch, and places the mezuzah there, V'yachar and then he puts up the door frame next to it, lo, then it wouldn't be good. Misham tasa v'lo min ha'asui, that's a problem of tasa, v'lo min ha'asui. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rava, and Rava says, Hani pischi shimoy, these broken entrances, peturin min ha'mezuzah, they are exempt from mezuzah. The Gemara asks, My pischi shamoy, what are these broken entrances? What does that refer to? Pligi ba Rav Rechume v'Abba Yosi, that's a machlokus between Rav Rechume and Abba Yosi. Chad Omar, one says, Deleslu tikra, that it has no roof. The Chad Omar and the other one says, Deleslu shakofe, that it has no shakofe. We'll see Rashi in a moment. And Rashi explains, Tikra, a roof, is Skofa Elyona. According to the first explanation of Rashi, this refers to the lintel above the doorway. And Shakfe is Mezuzos. According to the first explanation of Rashi, Shakfe refers to Mezuzos, which are the doorposts. Lishnachrin, another understanding, Tikra, what does it mean, Tikra? Shein Habayis Makora. It means that the house doesn't have a roof. And then Shakfe, according to the second explanation, what is Shakfe? That's a Skofa Elyona. That refers to the lintel. Again, that's on top of the doorway. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava Bar Shila, Amar Rav Chisda. Rava Bar Shila says that Rav Chisda says, Achsadra, a portico, essentially a structure with three walls, totally open on the fourth side. Petura min ha-mezuzah, it is exempt from mezuzah. Lefisha ein la psimin, because it doesn't have doorposts, it doesn't have those columns. The Gemara says, Hayesh la psimin, but if it had doorposts, chayiv, would it be chayiv in mezuzah? Lechizuk tikra hu da'avidi, those posts would only be made to strengthen, to hold up the roof. And the Gemara continues and answers, Hachi kamar, this is what we mean to say, Afal pisha yesh la psimin, even though it has those posts, Petura, it is still exempt from mezuzah, she'ein asuyin al lechizuk tikra, because those Petzimin are only made to hold up, to strengthen the roof. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Chazina Lahu Lispelide Deveimar, I saw the portico of the master, that refers to Rabbah, the Islu Petzime, that it had Petzime, it had these doorposts of Eleslu Mezusta, but there was no mezuzah, because again, the same idea, Kasavar he held, Lechizak Tikrahu de Avidi, that is just made to strengthen, to hold up the roof. And Rashi explains, Petzimin is Amudim, these are the pillars, essentially the doorpost, so to speak. Achsadra, what's an Achsadra? A portico, Shlosha Defanos Stumos, that's three walls that are closed below Pesach, with no doorway, no opening. V'haravias Psucha Legamri Mitachas, and then the fourth one is totally open from the bottom. Avolamali Yesh Dofen Ma'at, but above there is a little bit of a wall, Hamachzik Es Haschach, that's supposed to hold up the schach, which essentially acts as the roof. Hoel Ve'ein La Petzimin, since it doesn't have the doorposts, V'osa Psicha Lo Pesachu, so the opening on that fourth side is not really a Pesach, it's not considered a doorway. The Gemara then asked, Hayesh La Petzimin Chayavin, but if it had the Petzimin, then it would be Chayav Bitmiya, that's a question. V'yamai, why should that be? Chizuk L'tikra Hu De'avidi, that's a strength for the roof, HaPetzimin, V'lo L'shem Pesach, that's not made for a door. Ela L'chizuk Tikra Shelo Tibol, it's just made to hold it up so it shouldn't fall down. Aspelidi Debeimar, again refers to the Achasadros, Devei Rabbah, the porticos of Rabbah, and so again the Gemara said that if it's just made L'chizuk Tikra, there is no need for a mezuzah. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Brisa, Beis Shar, a gatehouse, Achsadra, a portico, Umir Pesas, and a balcony, Chayavin b'mezuzah. The Brisa says they are chayav, they are obligated in mezuzah. That goes against what we said above with regards to an Achsadra. And the Gemara answers, B'achsadra devei Rav. This Brisa is not talking about a regular Achsadra, it's talking about an Achsadra of a study hall, and that does require a mezuzah. The Gemara says, Achsadra devei Rav, if we're talking about an Achsadra of a study hall, Kinjerona mal yasu, that's like a real room, of course, that is going to require a mezuzah. And the Gemara continues and says, B'achsadra romisa, we're actually talking in this brisa about a Roman portico, and again the brisa is saying that is chayav in a mezuzah. And Rashi explains, first, Beis Shar, that's a gatehouse, Bayis Katan, that's a small house, Sha'osin B'tzad Shari Chatzeros, they make this at the side of the gates of courtyards, V'yoshev Sham Shomer HaPesach, the guard sits over there. there. Chayeves b'mezuzah is chayev in mezuzah midrabanan. Rashi says this is chayev on a drabanan level. Kasha li Abaye. This is difficult to Abaye, who said there's no requirement of mezuzah. And the Gemara then said, Ahita katani chayeves, the brisa which says it's chayev in mezuzah, bi'achsadra devei Rav. It's an achsadra of a study hall, which is sheyesh lo daled defanos. It actually has 4 walls. Elashein magios l'schach. It's just that the walls don't reach the roof. They don't reach the schach, the top. And Rashi continues, b'achsadra romisa. Then the Gemara said, we're talking about a Roman portico. Asuya chalonos chalonos. That's made with many windows. And so again, that's why it is a chiddush for the brisa to say that. But again, that kind of portico does require a mezuzah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rachva, Amar Rav Yehuda. Rachva says, the Rav Yehuda says, Behar Ziki, Chayev, B'shtei mezuzos is Chayev, and 2 mezuzos. The Gemara asks, my Behar Ziki, what is this Behar Ziki? Amar Rav Papa Saba, Mishmei de Rav. Rav Papa Saba said in the name of Rav, Beis Shar, it is a gatehouse, Hapasuach l'chotzer, it opens up to a chotzer, to a courtyard. Uvatim psuchin l'Beis Shar, and also there are houses that open up directly to the gatehouse, so it essentially opens up on both of these sides, and therefore it requires 2 mezuzos. And Rashi explains, Beis Shar hapasuach l'chatzer boy beis mezuzos. It needs 2 mezuzos. Achas bepesach shemin Beis Shar lebotim. One is for the opening from the Beis Shar to the houses. The achas bepesach shemin hachatzer lebeis Shar, and one is by the opening from the chatzer to the Beis Shar. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the sages taught in a brisa, Beis Shar hapasuach legina v'lakitonis, a gatehouse that opens to a garden and to a kitonis, which is a small room, essentially a small house. Rabbi Yossi Omer nidon kikitonis. Rabbi Yossi says it's considered as a kitonis, a mezuzah, as the kitonis, a mezuzah is required. The Chachamim omrim nidon kebeis Shar. The Chachamim say it's considered like a Beis Shar that essentially opens to an open area like a garden, and therefore it is not obligated in mezuzah. And the Gemara continues and explains the machlokas tanoim. Rav u'Shmuel da'amri tarvayu. Rav and Shmuel, they both say migino lebayis. Will understand this as Rashi initially essentially understands it, that migino lebayis means from the gatehouse to the kitonis, to that house, that entrance that goes from the gatehouse to the house. Kuli alma lo pligi dechayev. There, everyone agrees it's chayev. My time, what's the reason? Bia debayisi. That's the entrance of the house. Ki pligi mi bayis legina. The whole machlokas is the entrance of the gatehouse to the garden. Mar savar kitonis. Iker, one says the kitonis is the main thing, and that also requires a mezuzah. Essentially, all the entrances need a mezuzah. Umar savar gino iker, and the other one says no, the garden is the iker, and therefore that entrance does not require a mezuzah. That's the explanation of Rav and Shmuel. Rabba v'Rav Yosef de Amri Tarvayu. Rabba and Rav Yosef, they both say mibayis legina de kuliyama lo pligi de pater. To the entrance to the garden, everybody agrees is exempt. That's not a machlokas tanoim. My time of pischa de gina, what's the reason? That's the entrance of the gina, the garden. Ki pligi migino labayis. The machlokas is from the garden to the house, meaning again the entrance to the house, to that small room. Mar savar bia debayis, who one says it's the entrance to the house, it needs a mezuzah. Umar savar kula, and the other one says no, it's all essentially it revolves around the gina, and there is no obligation for mezuzah. And we'll take a look at Rashi. First, Rashi says an explanation that he rejects and says, "Velinir, it appears to me, ibcha, the reverse as follows: Migino labayis. What does it mean, Migino labayis? Hainu pesach hakitonis. As we explained, that's the entrance to the small room. Shahaboy min hagino derech beis shar nechnasin bo lekitonios. Because again, when one comes from the garden through the gatehouse, he enters these small rooms. Kol yalma lo pligi dechayev. Everyone agrees chayev. Ki pligi mi bayis legina. The machlokas is to the gina. Pesach hachitzon sheyotzi mi beis shar legina. That's the outer entrance going to the garden from the gatehouse. Shahayotzin min habayis derech beis shar yotzin bo legina. Again, people leave the house, they go through the gatehouse to the garden. Mar savar ikar beis shar l'shem knisas kitonis nasa. One says the beis shar is really made for that small room. V'havik hashar beis shar diam. It's like any other beis shar. Shechayav and kol psacha b'mezuzah. We say all the doors of a beis shar are chayav in mezuzah. Umar savar, the other one holds ikar beis shar legina nasa. The beis shar is really made for the garden. Liyatziyah mikitonis legina. The real purpose is to go from the kitonis to the gina. Hilkach nidon ka'avir v'lo kebeis shar. Therefore, it's like air, or ka'avir of the gina. It's like essentially the airspace of the gina, and therefore it's not considered like a beis shar. And Rashi continues with another explanation, Lishna Achrin, another explanation, Ve'ikr, and this is really the proper explanation, Migino Labayis. What does it mean, Migino Labayis, in the Gemara? It means, Im Keshu Poseach Pesach Migino Labayis, if when he's opening that entry from the Gina to the Bayis, the Heker Tzir Have Bebayis, that the indication of the hinges are by the house, they're towards the house, the Kuliyamalo Pligi de Chayev, then it's considered like the house and it's Chayev, Kitonis Ikr, but the other explanation is that the Kitonis is the main thing. V'chayev, and one is obligated in mezuzah. V'yafagav detzir, so begina, even though the indication of the hinge is really towards the garden. And Rashi notes, according to this explanation, that it all depends on the location of the hinge. And Rashi continues that according to this, that we don't follow where the hinge is. The chiyamrin and la'el, that when we said earlier, halach achar heker tzir, we say we follow the indication of the hinge. Hani mili v'pesach debein shrei bote. That's by an entrance between two houses, as we said on the previous Amud. The tarvayu ikr, both of them are considered to be ikr, they're considered to be primary. Aval hacha ikr kitonis, but here the primary is the kitonis, that small room, that house essentially, v'lishma nasa, everything's made for that. Chayev, therefore chayev. Umar Savar, the other one says, ikaru l'shem gina of it, that no, it's really all made primarily for the garden, upatran, we say exempt, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph.